We are here to talk about money, which you'll find is one of the most challenging things to talk about. Again, my name is Leah Bonvissuto, and I believe that great speakers are made, not born. And also, we believe that communication is a skill and that it's something that can be improved upon. More about that later. Again, my name is Leah Bonvissuto, and I'm a communication coach and co-founder of a company called Bespoken. We help people communicate consciously and be powerfully present when speaking. We give people tools to feel confident and in control of their communication. My background is in theater. I was a theater director for many years, and I loved helping people get out of their own way and be clear on stage. But it wasn't enough. I wanted to help people tell their own stories. And that's what I do at Bespoken. Today, our clients include leaders all over the country at LinkedIn and AOL. We've worked with AIG. I coached a 15-year-old girl who wanted to say like less because she believed it made her sound less confident than her friends. And we consistently coach professionals who are going out to interview for new jobs to help them communicate their value and their worth. We work with individuals and groups, leaders and teams. And we are a women-owned business. This is me and my co-founder, Jackie Miller. We founded the company about 3 years ago. And we are in the business of changing lifelong behaviors. And we believe that being natural does not always come naturally. So what does this mean? This means that we are changing habits, and in their place, we are giving people tangible tools which they can work into their everyday. We're not experts in communication. We believe that we are students of communication, and we learn every day from our clients. Really, we provide a safe space and an outside eye to help you make the impression that you want to make. We come to your voice. We don't tell you what to say or how to say it. Instead, we give you tangible tools. So, I know we have a lot of different types of people on the line. When do you talk about money? When does money come up in your conversations? We have entrepreneurs on the line. Are you pitching yourself or your company to investors or potential clients? We have small business owners on the line. Are you pricing your services and wanting to make sure that you are putting the correct value on your time and your goods? We have freelancers on the line. Are you valuing your time? We have professionals on the line who are asking for a raise. And of course, there are tons of personal conversations we have or should be having every day about money. And yet so many of us avoid the conversation altogether. Let's talk about that. A recent Wells Fargo study found that nearly half of all Americans say the most challenging conversation to have is about money, is about personal finances. Second to that is death. And I really enjoy this statistic because it reminds me of one that I deal with often, which is that 74% of us are terrified of public speaking, most of us more than death. I think it's really interesting that the topic most avoided is money, and the fear most noted is public speaking. And so naturally, talking about money is terrifying for most of us. And now when I say public speaking, I want to be very clear that I don't mean standing at a podium and addressing a room of 300 people, which many of us seldom do or we avoid altogether. But what I'm actually referring to is speaking up at a meeting or asking for a raise or pitching your services to a new client. This is speaking in public, and this is where we can use help when money is involved. A recent Bustle survey found that half of all millennial women never discuss finances, even though most of them worry about money every single day. I'm sure many of you can relate to this. Money is on our minds, and yet we don't talk about it. I find this particularly interesting also because in my work with people helping them prepare for public speaking, that is also something that we typically avoid working on. Communication is the single most important skill that we all have in personal and business affairs, and yet most of us are so overwhelmed by it and don't know how to prepare that we wing it. It's endlessly fascinating to me that we were never taught how to communicate. And in this way, Personal finances can be such an overwhelming, complicated conversation that instead of having the conversation, we avoid it altogether. And I'm not just saying that we avoid having the conversation with our partners or our bosses or our family. We avoid having the conversation about money with ourselves. I know myself personally, I'm very guilty of this. We are so overwhelmed about having the conversation that we avoid it altogether. There's a great podcast I recommend in general called Death, Sex, and Money, which is about these difficult topics that are really tricky to talk about. And there was an episode a few months ago with the founder of Ellevest, which is a financial planning service for women. And the founder of Ellevest and the host of Death, Sex, and Money had a really challenging, uncomfortable conversation about money. Even two people who are experts in their fields talking about difficult conversations about money had an awkward chat about money. There's reasons behind it. It's very challenging. And I hope today you'll leave with some tools to break it down and make it a little bit less overwhelming. 93% of communication is nonverbal. This statistic consistently blows my mind. This means that the words you choose, what actually comes out of your mouth, accounts for only 7% of someone's perception of you. And yet we don't spend much time working on our delivery or communication skills. And when we're approaching a conversation about money, we tend to not think about it at all and wing it in the moment. This can be disastrous. And as women, unfortunately, there are some things out of our control that we cannot have much say over, and we have to acknowledge these things. There's a study by Harvard, Wharton, and MIT that says men's voices are perceived as more persuasive, fact-based, and logical than women's voices when giving identical pitches. It's infuriating, I know. And a recent report by Lean In and McKinsey notes that women who negotiate for a pay raise or a promotion are 30% more likely to receive feedback that they come off as bossy or too aggressive than men. This is infuriating. Women, as we know, earn 79 cents to the dollar that men make, and that is only for white women. Women of color earn significantly less. These are all things that need to change. These are all things that are frustrating, but they're also beyond our control. And so as we approach conversations about money, it is absolutely necessary that we go about that by embracing our strengths and by realizing what we naturally do better than men. And luckily, that list is long. Women are naturally better listeners than men. I don't know if you know this, but men use half of their brains to listen while we engage both lobes. Without any added effort, we are better listeners than men. Women have more empathy than men, which I'm sure does not come as a surprise to most of you. And also, we're better collaborators. Data suggests that women-led companies perform better financially. So there we have it. We're stronger listeners, we're stronger collaborators, and we're more empathic. Those are the three top qualities that lead to strong leaders and success in business. What we have to do is embrace those strengths in our communication skills, and that will set us ahead instead of trying to talk like men or approach these conversations the way our male counterparts would. Again, I hope you leave today with some solid, tangible tools that you can put in place the next time you're approaching a conversation about money. And as Gloria Steinem says, nothing changes the gender equation more significantly than women's economic freedom. All right, here we go. Again, so many of us do not prepare for these conversations about money, and that's because we don't know how. We were never taught. Communicating can seem very overwhelming when it's this large, intangible thing. We don't know how to break into it. We don't know where to start. And that makes a lot of sense. We were never taught. So my rule, whenever something is overwhelming, I encourage you to break it down into its smallest possible bits. Break it down until you are no longer overwhelmed. For some people, that will mean breaking it down a little bit into a few steps. For other people, that means breaking it down quite more significantly. I'm a queen of to-do lists. They make me feel really comfortable. My to-do lists are really, really comprehensive. So here we go, a short to-do list for you in preparing for having these conversations about money. First of all, you should articulate an objective. And this is only for you, and you are the only one who can put the right words to this. That means if you're asking for a raise, you might articulate something like, my goal is to come out of this conversation with a 20% increase in my pay. Or something like, I want to get this amount of commission from each sale that I do based on this particular situation. The more specific you are in communicating that for yourself, the better. And no one else will see this objective. This is something that you can write at the top of your preparation sheet as you're practicing. It'll be there to remind you, and it will keep you focused on what the conversation is about. Our default is always to go back to ourselves and look inward. So we always want tools to help ourselves look outward, especially when we're having conversations about money, which can be really, really hard. The second thing you want to do is identify your audience. In theater, we call this knowing your audience. You have to know who's in the room. And the more you can know about that person, the more comfortable you will feel. In some cases, it's even helpful to make up things if you don't know the answers. So you might know who you're having this conversation with. It might be a long-standing boss. It might be a room of colleagues. And that might be pretty familiar to you or pretty scary to you, depending on who it is. But fleshing out who those people are, how they might respond, what their likes and dislikes are, what they do for fun, all of those ideas humanize them. And that can help you feel more prepared. It might be someone that you know nothing about, like a new potential client. And in that case, the internet is your best friend. You can find out so much these days by going to LinkedIn or Google, or feel free to make it up. Create a character for that person. The more you understand who they are, the more prepared you'll feel. Once you know your audience, and this is one of the most important parts, you want to separate content from delivery. So many of us approach communication as one big ball of stuff that we're not sure what to do with. Break it down. First, figure out what you want to say. And I don't recommend scripting. I don't recommend picking very specific words to choose. Instead, what's the essence of what you're trying to communicate? What are the ideas? And this can be done by making a bulleted list of plot points that you're going to address in the conversation. This might be the first bullet as the history you've had with the company and what your accomplishments have been. The second bullet might be what you expect in the future in terms of what your goals are and how you're going to meet them. The third bullet might be your ask of what you're asking for specifically financially. Never hold yourself to a script. That's just one more thing to do right in the moment, and it's not going to serve you. Communication is improvisational. We're not in the business of putting together a script. Once you separate content from delivery, it's important to practice conscious communication. So few of us feel in control of our communication. We feel like it's happening to us instead of us doing it. And this takes practice because we're simply not practiced in it. But if you can ingrain some of these conscious communication skills, they will be there for you in the moments you need them most. I don't recommend putting any of these into practice for the first time right when you're having that difficult conversation. Safely and slowly ingrain them one at a time into your real everyday life in situations where you feel really comfortable. And once you start to do that, they will become habitual. They will replace those older habits, and they will be there for you when you need them most. The first tool you can do in raising your awareness is to identify unconscious behaviors. Now, this is something that women are criticized for more than men, which is incredibly unfair because we all know that men are guilty of all of these habits as well. This is both men and women. And a lot of times people are criticized for these behaviors, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And I want to be very clear that there is nothing wrong with saying like or just or There is absolutely nothing wrong with choosing to use those words. The problem can come, though, when these behaviors are unconscious, when we don't hear them. I have clients who say nearly every other word and they can't hear it. And when that happens, it can become what we call a gray area. And you don't want to be in a situation, especially an important conversation, where there is gray area. So to go through these, we have qualifiers. These are the words that we add to our language that make us sound like we're not too committed to what we've just said. The kind ofs, the justs, the I think, like. Does that make sense? I know a lot of us are really guilty of that last one. The filler is the you know, the us, the ums, the bridging from one thought to the next. The fear that if we let there be silence, it will make us seem like we don't know what we're talking about, or like we're putting undue pressure on the person we're communicating with, when in fact, silence is really powerful. Again, filler, there's nothing wrong with any of these behaviors as long as you're using them consciously. And the apologies. I know we're all really familiar with this. The literal I'm sorries. Uptalk, which is when we end our statements in a question mark, even though we're not asking a question. Vocal fry, which happens when we don't really breathe deeply enough when we're speaking and we speak from the back of our throat. This is something women are criticized for often when it was in fact created by a man, Ira Glass, on the podcasting stage. And we also apologize with our physicality. We make ourselves small. Now, all of these behaviors, again, and I can't stress this enough, are completely fine as long as they're done intentionally. I use quite a few of these behaviors intentionally, especially if I'm working with people who don't seem comfortable. I want to make them feel comfortable. But the importance is being intentional and being prepared. If you have these habits, they will really likely rear their ugly head during these difficult conversations about money, and they might become super heightened, actually. So before you have these conversations, it's important to first hear these unconscious behaviors, and that you can do by asking a friend or a colleague, or recording a voice memo of yourself during a casual conversation. And once you can hear them, you can start to replace them. Once you can hear them, it's going to drive you crazy for about a week because you're going to hear them nonstop and not be able to do anything about it. But then slowly but surely, you'll be able to replace them. I recommend replacing them with a deep breath or a pause. Again, silence is incredibly powerful. It helps you set the stage. And so, you don't want to walk into a difficult conversation about money and have it be unintentional, right? You want to be super intentional with the words that you use. And you can tell just by removing those unconscious behaviors, I'm going to sound more assertive. And if I sound more assertive, I'm more likely to get what I want. This goes back to that 7% rule. You can say what you want as affirmatively as you like in words, but unless you sound confident behind them, you will be setting yourself up not for success. So keep an eye on those unconscious behaviors and let me know how that goes. Next up, this might seem counterintuitive because we think of communicating as us talking, but listening is so important. And when someone feels listened to, they are more likely to connect to you. And again, as women, we listen with both parts of our brain instead of half like men. So use this to your advantage. And this is a tool called active listening. If you employ this while you're having a conversation about money, it will do a few things. First of all, it will keep you out of your head and thinking of what you want to say next, which can often really alienate the person that you're speaking to. And also, it will help you feel connected to the person you're communicating with. And especially if that's a person of authority or a new client who you feel has some power over you, it can be really helpful for you to feel a connection with that person. And naturally, it helps that person feel a connection with you. We spend 70 to 80% of our waking hours communicating, and 45% of that time is listening. I'd venture to say that in these challenging conversations, that number goes down quite a bit because we're thinking of what we want to say next instead of listening. So give it a shot next time. And as you're preparing for these meetings, use active listening as a tool. It's there to serve you. After hearing something, 45% of us forget it within 24 hours, and 65 to 70% of us forget the information within 36 hours. This is because we are not active listening. I really recommend employing active listening in these difficult situations. It's not easy and it takes vulnerability, which takes practice, but you're going to set yourself up for success. And also, you're going to really be able to have a true conversation with the person that you're speaking with, instead of having a conversation with yourself and your own fear, which can be really overpowering. The next tool we're going to talk about is called embodied cognition. This is one of my favorite ideas. This is the idea that what I do on the outside affects how I feel on the inside. This is the idea behind fake it till you make it. This is the idea behind power posing and Amy Cuddy. Amy Cuddy's great TED Talk proved that if you stand in an open position centered for 60 seconds, you will increase your testosterone, which makes you feel more powerful, and decrease your cortisol, which makes you feel less stressed. There is real science behind this, and I've seen it work. It's very powerful. I really recommend forcing yourself into an open, rooted, physical position in these conversations about money. It is the difference between closing your body physically and being closed off to the person that you're communicating with, and opening physically, which feels very vulnerable and exposed. But again, not only will you feel more confident scientifically with that testosterone going up and that cortisol going down, the person you're communicating with will see you as more confident, which means they will treat you more confidently. And that in turn makes you feel more confident. This idea of embodied cognition is literally changing the way you interact with the world and the way the world interacts with you. And we all know that communication is not static. This is not a plateau that you get to and we level off. It would be very easy if it was. Communication is an active participatory sport, and we constantly have to tend to it. And so by forcing yourself to be physically open, which might not feel comfortable at first, but with some practice, it will start to feel more normal. You will help yourself feel more comfortable and more confident. You'll be setting yourself up for success. I also really recommend choosing your shoes wisely. This is one of the most important things that I work on with my clients. If your shoes don't make you feel powerful, get rid of them. And that means something different for all of us. Some women feel really great in strong heels. I need solid boots or a wedge to feel good. And I am super picky with my shoes, especially if you're walking into a challenging conversation about money. Choose your shoes wisely. The next tool we're going to talk about is eye contact. This is so important, I cannot overstate it enough. We all know when we're talking to someone who does not make eye contact, how it makes us feel. The problem is that that means something different to all of us. And just like before, anytime there's gray area, we want to get rid of it. So if you're not meeting someone's eyes, who knows what reason that could be? It could be because you're tired, or you've had a bad day, or you're nervous. But what if they take that as you're not interested, or you're bored, or you're not invested? It's best to get rid of gray area and maintain eye contact. I often get the question of, what if the other person doesn't want to maintain eye contact and their eyes are leaving me? To which I say, if you are a solid foundation and you remain connected and you're there for that person so that if they should feel comfortable enough, they can choose to meet your eyes, they will appreciate it so much. I don't think it's possible to be too connected with eye contact. Now, there is a difference between darting through and being super intense about it, but as long as you are breathing, you cannot be too intense with eye contact. Make sure you're breathing and make sure that you're meeting their eyes. There's science behind this as well. When you meet someone's eyes, a hormone is released called phenylethylamine, and that simulates the feeling of being in love. It's incredibly powerful. If you lock eyes with someone on the street, or if you lock eyes with someone in a meeting, and you both can stay there for a moment, you will feel more connected to each other. It will prevent the conversation from becoming too foreign or too businesslike, and it will help it become a little lighter and a little bit more personal, which can only help when talking about money. I also recommend practicing your breathing. Now, right before a conversation about money, our parasympathetic nervous system can be going crazy. This is our fight or flight response. A lot of us will call this anxiety. This is our heart beating out of our chest. This is our throat tightening up. This is our palms sweating. These reactions can be quite debilitating if you let them control you. I have to say, I do this for a living and I still have these physical sensations. I used to call it anxiety and it used to be very overpowering. Now I call it adrenaline because I believe that people who feel these same sensations, who enjoy public speaking, call it adrenaline and energy. But if you can do some deep breathing before a conversation like this, you will soothe your parasympathetic nervous system. You will literally massage your spine. And what you have on the slide here is a technique called square breathing. This helps you slow your breathing, and there's retentions in between, which will help you really soothe your system. So you can see here, it's an inhale for 4 seconds, holding the top of the inhale for 4 seconds, an exhale for 4 seconds, and holding the bottom of the exhale for 4 seconds. I encourage you all to take a screenshot of that and practice it. It's really life-changing. Do it in the bathroom right before you have a conversation about money. It will help you get through it and feel more rooted. And I also recommend that you should take a deep breath before you speak. Think of your voice hitting the walls when you're speaking. You will literally take up more sound with the size of your voice. This can be really powerful. It's the difference between speaking at the bottom of an inhale and taking a deep breath and speaking at the top of your inhale. Take up more space with the sound of your voice and you will appear and feel more confident. I want to introduce also this idea of taking up more space. We all make ourselves small when we feel like we are in a difficult conversation. We tend to want to recede and almost like we're not there, and this can be quite damaging. Take up more space. You deserve it. These are challenging conversations, but with preparation and practice, they can be done. And a big part of that is understanding that we all feel uncomfortable in conversations about money. And we all need tools and techniques to help us prepare so that we feel confident going into them. Don't wing it. Make a process for yourself and really ingrain that and practice it, and it will be there for you when you need it. Take up more space, ladies. I can't say it more than that. Take up more space. All right. Again, my name is Leah Bonvissuto. I'm a co-founder of a company called Bespoken. Please visit our website, bespokenpartners.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter. We email out about once a month with tips and tricks and classes. Also, I would like to offer everyone involved in today's webinar a 10% discount on our individual training process. If you do that through emailing me, my email address is right there, and mentioning the code Savvy Ladies. This can be done over Skype or in person if you're in New York City. Again, that's Leah at bespokenpartners.com for 10% off an individual training process of 3 sessions together. I'll be happy to talk you through what that means in more detail if you email me at the email here, Leah at bespokenpartners.com. You'll also get an email later today with some links and resources about things we've discussed today. I hope it was helpful. Don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. And again, I want to thank Maggie and Stacy and everyone at Savvy Ladies for having me, and to all of you for spending your Wednesday afternoon on this webinar. Go have those difficult conversations about money. You can do it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Leah. We had some questions come in for you during your presentation, and I'll start with the first one here and remind everyone, if you have a question now, you can use the chat box or you can email info@savvyladies.org. First question we have is, I don't want to be perceived as bossy or aggressive, like you mentioned. How can I stand up for myself without sounding too bossy?
Sure, it's really challenging. And we, of course, have to recognize that some people are going to make assumptions about us that are way beyond our control. But a really good technique that I recommend everyone try is something that actors do, which is called playing an action. And this is to take the focus off of you and put it on the person you're communicating with. When we're talking about things that we're passionate about or that we're sensitive to, like money, we put the focus on us, which can be really damaging. So, play an action, which means I am going to support him or I am going to inspire her. Doing something to another person, not only does it put a positive bend on what you're saying, so that if you're worried about coming off as aggressive or bossy, you're going to automatically be playing a positive action like to educate or to inform or to ignite. And that can be done by, it's only you can make that choice of how to do that. But you can, without changing the words you're using, make the choice to welcome that person or to educate that person.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have is, I'm guilty of uptalk. What can I do to stop this?
Yes, so many of us are. And a lot of the problem with uptalk, again, I have many male clients who do this too, even though it's unfairly attributed to women. I think the problem stems from the fact that in today's society, we no longer speak in full sentences. And I'm just going to do an example of it right now. I'm not going to end my thoughts. I'm going to have filler in between and end in a question mark. So there's really no end to my sentence. The first thing to do is to record yourself and to really hear it. Now, getting used to listening to the sound of your voice can be particularly aggravating because we don't hear our voices the way someone else hears it, because we literally hear the sounds bouncing off our bones and our blood and our vessels, everything in our body. So it's normal to not like the sound of your voice. Record yourself, hear the uptalk. Once you can hear it, you want to practice in a safe space speaking really affirmatively. Practice physically. So you can use a tennis ball, and as you say something, my name is Leah. It is Wednesday. Practice with a tennis ball to really reinforce the physical nature of speaking down. It's what we call landing the thought. And if you can do that enough in a really safe environment that's really controlled and practice almost in a microscopic way, it will slowly start to go into your everyday. You don't want to practice it in your everyday because then you're thinking about not speaking in a question mark instead of connecting with the person that you're communicating with.
Okay, great, thanks. Another question is, it's easy to think that I can tell myself to breathe in the moment, but when the moment comes, I panic and forget everything. What are some things I can do to fix this?
Sure. I really recommend practicing the breathing techniques outside of the room first and foremost. They are going to be there for you if you practice it outside. Once you get into the room, into the conversation, really ideally you want to let a lot of this work go and be as present as you can. But of course, you'll have done a lot of preparation beforehand so that you're prepared to be present with that person. In the moment, though, especially if nerves are a problem for you and you feel like they're going to be overpowering, give yourself a physical focus. This can mean a few different things. You really want to get out of your head and into your body, because in our head is where our nerves live, and that's where they can cycle and they can become quite downward spirally and quite overwhelming. But I like to put a marble in my pocket or something soft like a stone, and I put my attentional focus, my mind's eye, on that marble. I hold it in my hand in my pocket, and that helps me feel physically centered. And this is something that comes from the world of yoga, and it's a way to get out of your head and into your body. Also, this can be helpful to feel your feet on the floor. If you can feel your feet on the floor, it will help ground you, help you feel rooted. It'll help prevent that feeling of flying and flittering that can happen with those nerves. Give yourself a rooted physical focus, something to call your attention to that's outside of your head.
Okay, All right. Well, I want to thank you, Leah, for an excellent presentation. There were so many helpful tips in there. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today and asking questions. We will be sending out Leah's contact information here and also some of the resources that she mentioned during the presentation. So thank you again so much, Leah.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Wednesday.
Bye-bye.